Shalom, my Hebrews and Shebrews. This is Oilfield Disciple. Um, some of you may be new to this channel. I'm doing this video in response to not really a question, but a statement that was made in a Facebook group. Uh, and I guess the statement was, what do y'all think about drinking alcohol? And now, this Facebook group, I'm fairly new to the group. I'm not going to name it, but it's actually a pretty informative group. There's quite a bit of good information that comes from there. But one thing I've noticed, um, and it's like a whole lot of other believers, uh, groups, followers of Yeshua groups, whether it be Facebook or other. Um, Opinion flies. Opinion rules over that of Scripture. Um, Everybody has an opinion on things, and which is fine. But when you're answering a question for someone, when biblically speaking, uh, I believe we ought to stand on the Scripture and not use, but walk through what the Scriptures say. Um, and what do the Scriptures say? And so, as per this channel, I'm gonna flip around. I'm just out for a nice cruise today, praying, listening to music, and um, enjoying the morning. And so, I'll put the camera around like we do on this channel. Cruise around out here in the backwoods with me. I guess you call it the backwoods. This is kind of the desert southwest, oil field country. And so, I'm going to try to answer this as I drive. All right. So, um, what do we think about drinking alcohol? Well, the first thing we need to do is go see if God condemns it. If God in His law in the Torah, um, or Jesus Yeshua in the Gospels, um, says it is a sin. And if we find it to be a sin, then it doesn't matter what else is said. That's game over. But in this case, for this instance, for this subject, um, I'm yet to find it where Yahweh says it's a sin. Um, Now, it is not a sin to drink alcohol. What becomes a sin is when you become drunken, when you become um, inebriated because of it, and you act foolishly. Uh, if we go look at all of and a lot of people like to interject their opinion into this because of modern cultural Christianity, modern cultural churchianity, religiosity. And they'll take some scripture, and they'll use it, and that's just what they do. Though they use it, and we have to be careful with this because that's making the Bible say what you want it to say to fit your narrative or fit your agenda, and we have to be very careful with that. So the passages that I've come up with, that I've looked through, that are negative towards drinking alcohol, all have to do with being drunken. Um, and inebriated. The ones that um, are, I guess you say, positive towards drinking alcohol, um, if you read them in context, and I'll give you a list of them here in just a minute, of the pros and the cons, through Scripture. For example, 1 Timothy 5:23 um, uses alcohol as an example of medicine in a good, positive way. Um, and then Ecclesiastes 9:7, um, a little drink makes the heart merry, and so on. And so Psalms 104:14 through 15. Now write these down. I'm driving, so I can't just read them out. Um, Psalms 104:14 and 15 is a positive. Um, 1 Corinthians 10:23, Paul actually states that he can do anything, but not everything is beneficial to him. Um, and so, therefore, Paul is making an exclamation that, yeah, he could probably drink. Now, I'm not. He doesn't necessarily say that in this passage, but he's saying he can do anything. So we'll just use this as an example. Paul could probably drink a couple glasses of wine, um, and be okay. But if he goes around someone that can handle wine and they want to drink 2 or 3 gallons of wine and fall down and slobber on themselves, then Paul is saying in that verse, in that passage, it's probably not a good idea for him to open up and have a glass of wine with that individual. And that should be the rule for all of us, for anything, whether it be alcohol or anything. And so what we like to do, um, because modern cultural Christianity has said drinking is bad. The Baptist Association, if you ask any diehard Baptist, nope, drinking's a sin. Well, show me where it says it's a sin in there. The results of too much drinking is a sin. That's gluttony. It's drunkenness. It's lasciviousness. And so we have to be careful with how we say things are sin. Um, Along with that, we take that narrative right there, we run with it. And so, therefore, if anybody asks if drinking is a sin or if drinking is okay, um, we automatically go to the results of what we encounter most oftentimes with people who like to drink, um, and automatically equate that with sin, and we shut it down right there. Um, but biblically speaking, that's just your opinion, because God never says it's a sin. Yeshua never says it's a sin. Paul doesn't even say it's a sin. You know, um, how you handle it can become a sin. Can become a sin. Um, so anytime we're dealing with things in the scripture, first thing we do is if it's a can we do this or can we not do this, go see what God says about it first and foremost. If God in His Word says it's sin, then that's case closed. It doesn't matter what else is beyond that. Um, and see, and there's where a lot of people like to argue, to fit their lustful desire and narrative, in modern cultural Christianity. We'll argue the fact and use the scriptures. Um, 1 Peter 4:3, in the list it says drunkenness. Ephesians 5:18, in the list says drunkenness. Proverbs 20 verse 1 and 23:31 is a list of not being drunken. Romans 13:13, drunkenness. See, these are all the results of overindulging in drinking. And so if you have an agenda or a narrative, um, to claim that drinking is a sin, those are the verses you pick out and use. You feel me? All right. So the same person will fight tooth and nail that drinking is a sin, when God never calls it a sin. But yet, we'll go back to Leviticus in the dietary law, and God calls eating this or that an abomination or sin, and they'll fight you tooth and nail saying that's been done away with. You see where the issue becomes? God calls it sin, never recalls sin, because God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's not going to recall for today not a sin when it was a sin 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, prior to Christ coming, prior to Messiah being here, um, and atoning for our sin on the stake. So you see where the issue lies here with modern cultural Christianity, religiosity, because they'll fight that you don't have to keep the Sabbath no more. They'll fight that you don't have to eat certain foods anymore. The dietary law has been done away with. They'll fight about that, although God has claimed it to be sin. But yet, turn around on the flip side, because they don't like drinking because they've seen 99% of the results of drinking. Um, they'll claim that to be a sin, where God never called it a sin. So which is it? Is God the same yesterday, today, and forever? Hosea 4:6, I am Yahweh Sabaoth, I change not. Um, which is it? Did God have a lapse in judgment after Christ came? You know, and then we get that twisted, and we separate Christ and Yahweh. Messiah is one being, and God is another being. But yet in Isaiah, um, I believe it's what I don't want to misquote it, but it's in Isaiah. Um, there is no other. God is one. Deuteronomy 6:4. Shema Israel. Yahweh Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Now, Yeshua is God. God in the flesh. He's fully God, fully man. So we get these all twisted up because we want it to fit our narrative. Um, and so we have to be very careful. The the best way to run or walk this walkout is go and see what God said about it. And God didn't change anything. God didn't change his mind on sin. God didn't operate with mankind for 4,000 years one way, and then change his mind and operate a total another, when we know in the new heaven, new earth, we're going to operate the way we operated in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Does that make sense? You feel me? God's not going to flip flop. Um, if he does, then he's a liar, and if he's a liar, then what are we doing following him? What are we doing? See, a little bit of self autonomy and a little bit of common sense, um, wisdom, knowledge, and that only comes from the fear of Yahweh. A little bit of that, and we'll see that, hey, did God call this a sin? And if he did, then it's sin forever. It's not going to change. He's not going to lift that sin. So let's define sin. 1 John 3:4. Sin is transgression of the law. What law? God's law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the Torah. Um, the prophets back that up. The disciples in Yeshua, in the Gospels, and in the epistles, they back up what Yahweh's already said. And if we read it anything other than that, if we read Paul's writings and it contradicts anything that God's already said, then you're reading it wrong. Paul didn't say it wrong. You're reading it wrong. And so eating certain foods was a sin, but now it's done away with. That's funny. It's ridiculous. Okay? It's a sin back then, it's a sin today. God never called drinking a sin, but now today it's a sin. You see the problem there? We have to go back and look what God says. And I know I've reiterated that a lot, but sometimes we need to be told over and over again before it finally clicks in our minds, especially when it's dealing with our own lustful desires and needs and agenda and narrative. And a lot of it just goes back to what we've been taught in our first truths. And what I mean by first truths is when you first come into religion, you first come into cultural Christianity. There's a whole lot of false doctrine that is being taught and regurgitated because nobody wants to go back and look at the Bible themselves. It sounds good. I'm just going to go with it. And Uncle Bob, he's a drunk moron. He always gets mad at every family gathering and winds up in a fight. Okay, I get that. I'm not saying you should go out and drink. I'm just saying that when you answer a question of is this okay or is this not okay or is this sin or is this not sin, you need to look at what God says about it, not what Pastor Joe says about it or Pastor Bob or any of the other ones. What does God say about it? Does that you feel me? Does that make sense? And so um, I just see a lot of times people interject their opinion into an answer when it comes to Yahweh, and that's why a whole lot of the people are turned off towards religion and religiosity because of that right there. We'll take a couple of scriptures and throw it at somebody and say, "See, right here it says," um, you know, okay. One, you've taken it out of context. Two, you just pulled it out and used it like a hammer, and that's not what Scripture's for. Scripture is to get the full understanding of the being of who Yahweh is, the holiness and the righteousness of Yahweh, and then we can start to um, to walk in that righteousness, that holiness that Yahweh's called us to walk in. Otherwise, we're just walking around spewing and regurgitating um, fallacies because we've heard it before and it sounded good. And it becomes an issue. And just like a little child, when you're trying to help someone get a grasp and walk in Yahweh, and you fill them full of bull, um, they know it. You know, that's why most will say, "Oh, it's the Bible's full of contradictions." No, the contradiction is you're not reading the full part of the Bible, or the fullness of the Bible. You're just reading a part of the Bible and using different scriptures to fit the narrative of what you've been taught and what you believe, what you feel, what you think, what you like, your lusts, rather than, yes, this has offended me today, what God wrote. I don't like it, but God said it, so I need to get in line with it rather than trying to twist it to fit me. You feel me? Does that make sense? I hope so. Um, Feel free to hit me up in the comments. We're 3 away from being at 100 subscribers on this channel. And like I said, I'm going to give away an ounce of silver um, when we hit that 100 subscribers. And so, y'all be blessed, be encouraged, and always be frustrated. This is Oilfield Disciple. I'll catch you on the next ride.